Keep an eye on the passenger in 12A. Looks like her first time flying. Probably needs a barf bag before we even hit cruising altitude." The words, laced with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the sky belonged to him, dripped from Captain Davies's lips to the senior flight attendant. The cabin crew shared a brief, knowing smirk. They saw her too, a woman of indeterminate age, dressed in simple, unassuming clothes, her hands resting calmly in her lap, her gaze fixed out the window not with fear, but with a strange, analytical stillness. She was a ghost in a seat, a non-entity. But in the NORAD command center 1,000 miles away, a grizzled Air Force general, reviewing flight manifests for a VIP transport, would soon see her name, Eva Rostova, and his blood would run cold, not with fear, but with a hallowed, profound respect. He knew what the arrogant captain in the cockpit did not, that the woman in 12A had more hours flying at the edge of the atmosphere, in machines that were more secret than they were metal, than he had flying commercial passengers to vacation spots. If you believe that true competence needs no introduction, type respect in the comments below. The initial ascent was smooth, a routine climb into the vast, blue canvas. Captain Davies made his familiar, buttery announcement over the intercom, his voice a balm of practiced confidence that settled the nerves of his 200 passengers. In seat 12A, Eva Rostova felt the slight shudder as the landing gear retracted, a familiar mechanical heartbeat. She didn't hear the captain's words. She felt the aircraft's response. Her calm was not the product of ignorance, but of an intimate, almost spiritual understanding of physics and machinery. She tracked the engine pitch, the subtle shifts in the airframe, the way the light bent across the wing's surface. It was a language she had spoken for 20 years in the cockpit of experimental aircraft, a silent dialogue between pilot and machine. Then it happened. Not a bang, but a sickening lurch, followed by a sound no passenger ever wants to hear, the catastrophic, winding down scream of an engine failing. Alarms blared in the cockpit. Davies's voice, now tight and strained, crackled over the intercom, a thin veneer of calm over a core of rising panic. A second lurch. The other engine sputtered, choked, and died. And in the sudden, deafening silence, punctuated only by the rising fear of the passengers, Eva Rostova closed her eyes for a single second, not in prayer, but in calculation. The quiet professional was now on the clock. The plane was a glider, a 200-ton brick falling with terrifying grace. In the cockpit, chaos reigned. Total hydraulic failure. "I've got nothing. The yoke is dead." The co-pilot screamed, his hands white-knuckled on a control column that had become a useless piece of plastic. Captain Davies, his face ashen, frantically worked the radio, his voice cracking as he declared the emergency. He was a bus driver whose brakes had just failed at the top of a mountain. The flight attendant, her face a mask of trained composure, burst into the cockpit. "Sir, there's a woman. She says she can help. She says she can fly it." Davies shot a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief. "Get her out of here. Are you insane? A passenger?" But Eva was already there, standing in the doorway, her presence filling the small space with an unnerving, absolute calm. She didn't ask. She didn't plead. She looked past the terrified co-pilot, her eyes locking onto the dying instruments with an analytical fire. "I have experience with dead-stick landings and unpowered airframes," she stated, her voice even, betraying no emotion. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact. The co-pilot, a young man running on pure adrenaline and protocol, moved to block her. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat." But Captain Davies, staring at the abyss on his altimeter, saw something in her eyes. It wasn't hope. It was competence. A chilling, almost inhuman competence that he had never witnessed before. He saw the way her gaze swept the console, not in a panic, but in a sequence, like a checklist burned into her soul. He saw her hands, not trembling, but steady as stone. The arrogance that had defined him just minutes before had been incinerated by sheer terror, and in its place was a desperate, primal need for survival. He made the decision that would save all their lives and end his career as he knew it. He nodded, a barely perceptible motion. "Let her try," he croaked, the words tasting like ash. Eva slid into the co-pilot's seat, her movements fluid and economical. She didn't look at the pilots. Her hands moved over the console, flicking switches, rerouting auxiliary power, her fingers dancing a complex ballet of emergency procedures. She took the yoke. "I have control," she said. And for the first time since the engines failed, the aircraft stopped its sickening drift and found a line. On the ground, air traffic control was a symphony of controlled panic. Flight 714 was a ghost, falling off the radar and unresponsive. Then, a new voice crackled through the frequency, calm and clear. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 714. We are experiencing total engine and hydraulic failure. Declaring an emergency. We are a heavy glider. Requesting immediate vectors to nearest viable runway." The controller, stunned by the impossible calm in the pilot's voice, began to respond. But he was cut off by a booming, authoritative voice on a secure military channel that suddenly bled over. "Tower, this is General Marcus Thorne at NORAD. Stand down. Patch me through to that cockpit." Now, there was a click, and the general's voice filled the cockpit of Flight 714. "Spectre, is that you?" Eva, her eyes locked on the horizon, allowed herself a flicker of recognition. "Affirmative, General," she replied, her voice unchanged. "It's been a while." The general's voice was grim, but filled with a newfound certainty. "Roger that, Spectre. We're vectoring 2 Raptors to your position. They are your eyes. Tell them what you need." Captain Davies stared, his mind unable to process the name. "Spectre. A ghost, a legend whispered about in classified debriefings. The pilot who flew the Aurora, the one they said could land a falling star." The reveal came not in a debrief, but in the sky itself. 2 F-22 Raptors materialized out of the blue, taking up positions on either wing of the crippled airliner. They weren't there to intercept, they were there to escort. The lead Raptor pilot's voice came over the radio, crisp and professional, but with an undercurrent of awe. "Flight 714, we have you. We are your escort. Lead reports you are holding a stable glide path." Unbelievable. In the NORAD command center, General Thorne had pulled up a file, its contents classified top secret. He read it aloud to the stunned FAA officials listening in. "Major Eva Rostova, callsign Spectre, United States Air Force, retired. Over 4,000 flight hours, 3,000 of them in experimental, high-altitude, and unpowered test craft. Recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross for landing the X-37B prototype after a complete systems failure over the Pacific." She wrote the book on dead-stick landings. Literally. It's the manual we use at Edwards Air Force Base. On the wing of the airliner, the Raptor pilot, seeing the runway lights in the distance, performed a maneuver not found in any official handbook. He brought his fighter jet close, looked across the gap at the silent woman in the cockpit of the falling giant, and rendered a slow, deliberate salute. It was a gesture of ultimate respect from one warrior to another. The landing was not a miracle. It was a masterpiece of physics and will. Eva used every ounce of her 2 decades of experience, bleeding off speed with impossible precision, judging the angle of descent with an instinct that felt like a sixth sense. The airliner, a machine designed to be powered by massive engines, touched the tarmac with a gentle screech, rolling down the runway on residual momentum, surrounded by a fleet of emergency vehicles that could only watch in stunned silence. The moment the plane came to a complete stop, a deafening silence fell over the cabin, broken only by a single passenger starting to clap, which quickly swelled into a thunderous, tearful ovation. In the cockpit, Eva Rostova simply powered down the remaining systems, her work done. Captain Davies, no longer a captain but merely a witness, looked at her, his face a canvas of shame, awe, and gratitude. "How?" he began, but he couldn't form the words. Eva finally turned to look at him, her expression not of triumph, but of simple, tired professionalism. "You learned to fly the plane, not the engine," she said softly. It was the only explanation she would ever give. The story of the Angel of Flight 714 became an instant legend, spreading through the aviation community like wildfire. It was told in hushed tones in barracks, in pilot lounges, and in FAA boardrooms. Captain Davies, facing a review board, gave a full, unvarnished account. He spoke not of his own failure, but of his own arrogance. He described the passenger in 12A not as a savior, but as a lesson. He was grounded, but he spent the next year speaking to new pilots, not about procedures, but about the one thing that almost cost 200 people their lives: assumptions. The salute from the Raptor pilot became an iconic image, a photo snapped by a passenger that went viral, a symbol of a hidden world of quiet professionals living among us. The airline, in a public act of gratitude, tried to offer Eva a lifetime of free flights. She politely declined. She wasn't a passenger. She was, and always had been, a pilot. Her reward was not the recognition, but the simple, profound satisfaction of a job well done, of lives saved through discipline and competence. The respect she commanded was not given. It was earned in silence, at the edge of disaster. Years later, the incident became a mandatory case study in aviation schools worldwide. It was called the Rostova paradox, the idea that the most critical asset in an emergency might not be in the cockpit, and that true expertise is often invisible. Captain Davies eventually returned to flying, a humbler and wiser man, who made it a point to personally greet every single passenger, his eyes searching not for signs of fear, but for the quiet calm of hidden strength. Eva Rostova was never seen in a commercial cockpit again. She was spotted once, years later, at a small airfield, quietly mentoring a young woman in a flight suit, pointing towards the sky. She was passing on her legacy, not through stories or medals, but through action and instruction. She was teaching her that the most important conversations a pilot ever has are not with the tower or the crew, but with the wind, the wings, and the unyielding laws of physics. Her legend was not a story of a single heroic act, but a testament to a lifetime of silent, relentless preparation. The legacy of Flight 714 wasn't written in headlines or carved into a monument. It was etched into the professional DNA of a new generation of pilots and leaders. It became a powerful reminder that assumptions are the enemy of safety, and that arrogance is a greater threat than any mechanical failure. Eva Rostova's silence in the face of mockery, her calm in the heart of chaos, and her precision under impossible pressure became the new gold standard. Her story proved that respect is a currency earned through demonstrated competence, not demanded by rank or title. It is a quiet authority that reveals itself not in words, but in the perfect execution of one's duty when everything is on the line. True strength doesn't need to announce its presence. It simply waits for the moment it is needed most, proving that the most powerful force in any room is often the quietest person in it. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where professional silence defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.